Okay, so we are hearing really weird sound. Hear that?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to your favorite podcast every week, the Sasquatch Outpost. I'm excited to be here. I appreciate everyone being in the chat room, and I see all of our regulars, Doug, Wayne, Patricia, Jeff, John. Appreciate you guys always tuning in. And yeah, we'll be bringing Chris and Kelly on in a few minutes. Hey, some of you, little diversion from Sasquatch for a minute. Some of you know that I graduated from Auburn University, and so I'm a humongous Auburn football fan. And this last week, we had probably our worst loss that I can remember ever since I went to college. We were playing New Mexico State. We were 26 point favorites in this game. We played it at home, and we got beat 31-10. And it was, you should have seen the comments that day and the next day online. Everybody's like, oh my God, what happened to Auburn? How in the world did they lose this game so badly? And this week is the Iron Bowl, which is the annual matchup between Auburn and Alabama, our arch rival. I would say arguably the most intense rivalry in the entire country. So the only good thing is I'm sure Alabama's thinking, oh man, we got this one in the shade. They got whooped. They got beat up and bullied by a team they should have beat by 3 touchdowns. So we got this made. So, and we're playing at Auburn next week. So I'm hoping that Auburn's going to pull it together. It's going to be 90,000 people there, and yeah, we'll see what happens. But it's I was watching that game last week, and I thought, oh my, this is so embarrassing, so embarrassing. But we'll see. As you can see, I'm a huge college football fan. I don't watch NFL. For those who are NFL fans, sorry. I think college just has more fun and life and spirit than the NFL. But that's just me. Yeah. Yes, Wayne, I want more. I want to beat Alabama and knock them out of the possibility of winning the national championship. That's the only thing we can do is spoil their chances. So we'll see. And this week in Bailey, those who live in the greater Denver area, we have what we call our Cowboy Christmas. Not this week, next week on December 2nd. And if you live anywhere nearby and you want to come, it's great fun. It's we have a Christmas market this year. We have a Santa. No, he's not a redneck Santa. He's a regular Santa. And we've got a parade, and we do it after dark. So it's all the floats are lit up, and there's this huge rivalry that goes on between a few of the businesses about who can win. And this one guy, the business is called Chimney Doctors. Matt has won it. I mean, he does this float that you can see a mile away because there's so many lights on his truck. So this year I am determined to beat Matt, and we'll see. I didn't even have a float last year, but I've got plans. I got plans, and we're going to see if we can pull it off this year. I hope we can. But if you're around, it's all free. We'd love to have you come and be a part of Cowboy Christmas. But between now and then, of course, is Thanksgiving, and we're going to be with some friends here. I don't know. I don't know a redneck Santa. You'll have to ask a redneck Santa, because Bailey may be redneck, but we don't know any redneck Santas around here. So, yeah. But Thanksgiving, we're going to be up here. We usually go down to be with my sister in Denver, and we're going to stay with some friends, and my daughter and her husband are coming up. So, should be a lot of fun. Yeah, I wish I could put the boss on a trailer. But we're going to have Sasquatch on that trailer. And like I said, I got plans. We'll see. I think I've mentioned my book that I'm working on. That's a compilation of articles I've written for a local newspaper over the past 7 years, I want to say. And so it's an easy way to write a book because I already have all the chapters right there. I just have to put them all together. And I think I'm going to call it a Bigfoot anthology, which to me means these articles, which I started writing in, I think, 2015 or 16. I can't remember now. And it's kind of the progression of my thinking about Bigfoot over the years, because I've certainly changed my mind about a lot of things. And I just would write about it every month when I wrote this article. So if you read the book when it eventually comes out, Doug Hychek's going to publish it for me. You'll see kind of how my thinking has changed. But my thinking has changed because of where my research has led me. It's not because things that I've seen although I'm influenced by other people, obviously, but my thinking has changed because the things I have seen and experienced have changed my mind about so many things. So when Doug Hychek was on the show a couple of weeks ago, after the show, he and I were talking, and he said he thinks that while we're doing the broadcast between YouTube and Facebook, I think it's he said we have about 200 people online tuning in, which is fantastic. I knew that on YouTube we have 60 to 80 depending on the day. I guess the rest comes from Facebook, but that's fantastic. I'm excited by that, and hopefully that'll keep growing. One quick question before I bring my guests in for this evening. In December, there's a Tuesday that falls on December 26th. So I'm trying to decide what to do. My kids are all going to be in town. It's going to be hard for me to pull away to do a live broadcast. What do you guys think? Do you think I should do a pre-recorded, or we give it a break for a week, or just curious? So put your comments there and let me know what your thoughts are. But I do hope all of you have a great Thanksgiving, and that you're going to be with family and friends and enjoy celebrating together. Thank you, Larry. Good to have you on tonight. Haven't seen you in a little while. So yeah, so I'm gonna have Steph kind of give me the lowdown on what you guys think about that for the December 26th. So without further ado, we're gonna play a couple of quick promos, and we're gonna bring Chris and Kelly and Josh in.
Show your support for the Untold Radio Network family of shows and join in on the conversation by using super stickers and super chats on YouTube. Got a question you want answered? Ask it live via a super chat and get real-time responses from our shows, knowledgeable hosts, and guests. Help keep the Untold Radio Network shows running strong. We need your support. Send your super chats and stickers now.
Hey, welcome, guys. Glad to have you with us.
Hi.
Hello.
And I'll say on their behalf, they live here in Colorado. They live in the mountains, and all of us who live in the mountains know our internet stinks. And so there's a delay for them because of their internet there. So just bear with us tonight, and we'll give them a little extra time to answer, knowing that they're delayed. But I'm really glad you guys are on with us tonight. And did I get, it is Josh, right? I got your name right?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's correct.
great.
Yeah. I'm Josh.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about yourselves, and then I've got tons of questions for you, but just tell us whatever you'd like us to know about you guys, just to start off with.
Can you start?
My name is Christopher Ortiz, and I'm a retired law enforcement officer for the U.S. Forest Service. I'm retired for about almost 9 years now. And I spend many days up in the Rio Grande National Forest. And this is my home in this area here in the San Luis Valley. And so I know the area pretty well, and worked with a lot of good people over the years with the Forest Service, and that's about it, I guess. And I had 22 years with the Forest Service, law enforcement, and I just have a few
Cool.
stories to tell, and that's about it.
Yeah, well, that's why you're here tonight.
And I'm Kelly Ortiz. I actually just left the Forest Service this last January, and I actually did some work for the Rio Grande National Forest. I also worked in Alaska. I worked for USAID. I've worked for enterprise teams. I've worked all over the country, really, for the Forest Service in a lot of different ways. I'm trained as an architect and landscape architect, but I did a lot of graphic arts, a lot of design work, things like that. So it's kind of taken me all over the country, all over the world. So it's a pretty great job in a lot of ways. It can be tough sometimes, but I think my favorite part was just being in the woods all the time. I really liked being out there. And then of course the people, everybody's really dedicated to their job in the Forest Service. So there's some really great people working for the Forest Service.
Awesome. Josh, what about you?
Well, I'm Josh Ortiz. I'm their hockey player. I travel with them everywhere. I mean, I've gone in the woods with them multiple times, whether it's skiing, hiking, just doing whatever. And that's pretty much it with me. Just living life.
And what league do you play for? I know you're a big hockey player. Just for those who are hockey fans.
Well, I was doing AAA in Colorado Springs for a little bit, but I moved home just to play rec this year. So, yeah.
Okay, cool. And I don't know a lot about hockey, but I know those who are committed to hockey, that is their life for sure. So, and you're in a great state for hockey, that's for sure.
Yes, sir. It's a very good state for hockey.
You bet. Kelly, I don't remember how you first reached out to us. Do you remember how I got your name or how we?
Yeah, we stopped by the Outpost this summer, I think it was. And it was like after we had had like a couple of experiences. I think I talked to somebody there and then left our contact information.
Okay.
Because it's one of those things like I don't know that we've shared a lot of stuff. We have friends that we've shared things with, but I guess I never really heard about much happening down here until we talked to you and then a couple other people. And I realized like actually how much was happening down here.
Oh,
It didn't really occur to me. You kind of think everything happens in the Pacific Northwest or down in the Everglades, but I don't know. And then I found out that there's actually a lot of activity up near Pikes Peak. I didn't know
mhm.
that either until we had moved up there and spent last semester when Joshua was training up there. I had heard some stories as well, but I just didn't really, I don't know. It's easy to write things off when you're in the woods and just explain it
Sure.
away. Some things you really can't, like other things that we sent to you. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey, like finding out about this and talking to other people and then really listening to other people's stories. And then all of the things that had been happening to us sort of just occurred to me. Wow, maybe that wasn't just a tree snapped off by the wind. I don't know. It's hard to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Well, I told a story last week from when I was hunting the week before, and I'm out by myself. I got out way before light. And just after light, I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, maybe 100 yards away, I hear this big whack against a tree. And there was nobody else with me. I was completely alone there were no other cars anywhere near. And so I'm thinking, okay, there's only so many things that whack a tree like that. So, but someone else could discount it as I don't know what, but it was very loud, very clear.
Yeah.
Only once.
And I'll be honest with you, my husband spent quite a bit more time in the field than I did because, I tried to get out in the field as much as I possibly could and, because that's really where I was happiest. But he was out every day and sometimes didn't come in till midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean, just law enforcement, it's one of those jobs where you have one person for 2 million acres. So
Yeah.
he covered a lot of ground. Whereas, I just try to drag people with me to go hiking now. And I get accused of having over the hill itis and around the corner itis because I want to keep going.
Sure. Well, you live San Luis Valley. I'm sure you know this is got the highest per square mile number of UFO sightings in the entire country. So, it's active for some things. It's very active, and UFOs is one of those.
Yeah, we have some of those too. We've just
Yeah.
got some stories about that as well. Just and a lot of it, was because we're driving late when we're,
Yeah.
Joshua actually just got done playing over in Crested Butte, and so we have to go up over Cochito Pass, and there is no cell phone coverage between Swatch and when you hit Gunnison, and so we
Yeah.
have seen a lot of stuff like driving back and forth at midnight. Yeah.
So there some of the questions I have, and I know we've got some photos and a couple of videos that you sent me that we're going to show in a second. But one of the questions I have is, in all your years with the Forest Service, what percentage of forest rangers, let me put it that way, believed in Bigfoot?
Ooh, what do you think?
That's something we didn't really share much with a lot of law enforcement, and they're law enforcement officers. They don't call us forest rangers. We're Forest Service law enforcement officers, and didn't share much. So we have a few friends that may have a few stories. or at least they think they know about what they had seen or heard from other people. But not a
Yeah.
whole lot was shared with us.
Okay.
And the other thing too is I think now, like in the last couple years before I left, people were way more open to that. But the first probably 15 years that I worked there, we just didn't hear much about it. Even if there was something strange and unusual that happened, everybody just sort of wrote it off. And so I think I don't know, I think maybe we have a different culture in terms of that now. I mean, there's a lot of things you just cannot write off. You can't, and so I think there's a lot of people that are more open to that. And maybe it's because of like podcasts like this. There's been lots of books
Yeah.
published and just recently. And so maybe that's part of the reason for that. But I would say that the first half of my career, nothing was said. And then towards the end, much more was talked about. But I don't know. I'm taking a gander at like maybe 30%. So I don't know though for sure.
Yeah. Well, I want to show you something and get your thoughts on it. Let's put up that sighting report. So let me explain this. So this is a fellow Bigfoot researcher who lives in the Pacific Northwest. His daughter was an intern at one of the Forest Service offices, and she saw this form on the desk. The left-hand page is the front page, and then she opened it. So she took a picture. She opened it. She took another picture. I crossed out the name of that particular office. I just decided I would cross it out. But it's in the Pacific Northwest it's a 1 million acre national forest. And so obviously they got it's one of their wildland fire teams or something. But you can't read it. But underneath the title, it says, don't bother submitting joke reports or fake reports. They won't be entered in the database. And then there's all these questions about where were you, who were you with, what did you see? So this is an official form, at least from that Forest Service office, where they are tracking Sasquatch and they actually have a database. Have you ever heard of that in any other office?
No, I have not. Have you?
No.
No.
Interesting. Because
so I'm surprised to see that.
Yeah, me too. Because it's clearly not public knowledge. And I would say my thinking is they can't be the only office from the National Forest Service that's doing something like this. They can't be.
Yeah.
So
our forest didn't do anything down here.
Yeah. And it just could be that I don't know what you call your the head person at a particular National Forest Service office, the head ranger. I don't know what your title is, but it just could be that whoever was leading this office had a particular interest in that, but clearly,
Right.
they have a report that they asked their guys to fill out. So I don't think it was fake. I mean, it could have been, but this guy's daughter was working, and I think she just happened to see this on a desk. So, interesting.
Right. It is.
So,
and we do hear a lot, like, people that I've worked with in fire have had numerous experiences up in, well, actually I should say Northern California, but also the Pacific Northwest. But one of the people that I worked with, I don't want to necessarily bring up anybody else's names in case they're not
Sure.
really comfortable with this, and I think a lot when you sign up for the Forest Service, you go to fire. I mean, you go to fire in some way, shape, or form. You support it in some way, or you actually get out and you are on the fire line, or you're a specialty. to help with radios or communications or whatever. So everybody goes on fire when you work for the Forest Service, even if you're in, say, like a purchasing job or something like that, because that's all part of that whole big fire organization. But a colleague of mine was up there just, it would have been a year and a half ago now. And he was up in the Bluff Creek area. And he, jokingly, when he came back, he said, something kept so when you're on fire camp, usually everything's run by generators, lights, everything. You tend to be remote, but sometimes not. Like, Chris has been on fires in Malibu, so that's not very remote.
Yeah.
But something kept unplugging everything that night. They couldn't keep the generators and everything going. And they, so his report was that, they could hear something running by, unplugging generators, things like that. And I think in fire camp, it was probably more of a running joke between people, because I don't know. And really, unless you have a one-on-one experience with something like that, which you probably would never forget. I don't know how you would explain that. So I think probably people just went about their job, their duties on the fire, and then just let it go at that. But it was relayed to me, because obviously people are thinking about it.
Sure.
And they're wondering. So it's not just me. It's not just, people are wondering.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, things being unplugged, there's only two options. It's people or it's a Sasquatch. And so, I'm sure, I've never heard of bears unplugging and lights and generators, honestly. So, but let's put up Jeff's question and then the other question. I think I can respond to those real quick. I think, Jeff, probably that's one of the reasons why they're doing that, is to track Sasquatch that are displaced by fires, because they have to be displaced when there's a big fire. So I think some of the questions on the report are very specific about where they were, what was the environment like where they had this encounter. So I'm sure that's one of the things that was behind that. And then the other questions from the Dead End Collective, I'll just answer this quickly. It's a very complex answer, but basically the Bigfoot community is divided between, this is very superficial answer, but between those who think Sasquatch is an ape, a version of an ape, and those who think Sasquatch is some type of person, basically. I mean, that's very simplified, and we're divided because none of us want to, none. Many Bigfoot researchers want to keep their information to themselves instead of sharing. And I've said this for over 10 years. If we could all share the information we have in our research, we'd be 20 years ahead in our knowledge, because everybody has information that the others don't have, but so many of us don't want to share it for whatever reason. So I've always found that strange, and that leads to division. When you're operating in silos, it leads to division. My personal opinion, my humble but accurate opinion. So, but the getting back to what we were just talking about, I don't know how many offices are doing this Forest Service, but it's not public knowledge. I'll tell you that. This is not, maybe it's just that one, but nobody knows that they're doing that. So, but I've always felt like you can only keep a secret for so long. The bigger the crowd, the more people have to keep this secret. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, like in law enforcement, we really don't document anything like sightings, because really that's not our job at the time. You just kind of hear this information from other folks, and you kind of put it in the back of your mind and go, "Oh, what's going on? Is this guy, is he really upset, or what did he actually see? Was it a bear or what? So you don't really document a lot of those information that's shared with the public, that's shared with you. We document all the laws basically all the laws have been broken. We don't really
Sure.
we don't really spend a lot of time with sightings like Bigfoot. Nobody ever really said that's what we do.
Did you get many people calling or reporting what they thought were Bigfoot sightings?
During my career, I only heard one person ever tell me that he had a sighting up on the Manga Pass up in the Rio Grande National Forest. And he was, it was so funny because when I encountered him, it was late in the evening, and I was checking camps in the Manga area. And this guy came up to me and he started talking to me, and he goes, "You're not going to believe what I saw." And I said, "What, a bear?" Because that's the first thing I thought would move. And we have a lot of people that have sightings of grizzly bears in this area too, but nothing's been confirmed. So I thought he was going to tell me about another bear sighting, grizzly bear sighting. And he goes, "No, it was Bigfoot." I said, "Bigfoot?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, and he pointed in a direction, and it walked off. So, excuse me. That was my encounter with that particular hunter.
Interesting. Well, let's look at some of the stuff you sent me, Kelly, and then any stories that you have from your own experience. I'd love to hear them. But let's show the one that video. Let's do that first one, Steph, of weird sounds, and then we'll talk about it. Let's rewind it to the beginning. I think it wasn't at the beginning.
Hear that?
Yeah, it was. There we go.
Okay, so we are hearing really weird sounds. Hear that? There is.
So you can hear. I mean, it's hard when you're recording.
I can. Yeah, you can.
Without a professional recorder, but I could hear it. I hope everyone else could hear something in the background. Tell us about this video when you guys recorded it.
So I'll let Joshua tell what happened, but I'll just provide some context. Every year we have a house right on the coast. In fact, it's in Washington State, and it's a little town just west of Port Angeles. And there's a house right on the coast. In fact, right directly across from this house you can see Vancouver Island. If it's really sucked in and there's a lot of fog, you can't really see Vancouver Island. But for the most part, Vancouver Island is right across from us, right across the strait. But if you turn around, which is how Joshua was facing, but if you turn around and look south, that is all the Olympic National Forest private lands from logging companies and Olympic National Park. And so right there in that little town, you're within, I don't know, maybe 1,000 feet of those logging areas. And in fact, there's a gated road and you can walk up there and then you can see for miles. So we're really right between the coast and those logging lands. And then it's just vast. There's no roads other than those logging roads that are closed, and we tend to hike them a lot. And that's where the sounds were coming from. And what made you pick up the phone?
So like she said, I mean, I like those logging roads, they're very, very secluded back there. I mean, I think the area that we stay in, like once you get over that hill, it's nothing but forest for miles and miles on the coast. So I don't know exactly what I was doing, but I think I was outside, just walking around, and I heard these noises that you were hearing, and I was like, wow, this is really, really strange, because that's usually the area. It was coming from that hill, and there's that old logging road back there, and I thought that's really, really strange. So I went in and I grabbed my camera, and I was like, I better start recording this, because it's something I've never really heard before, and it's not. At first I thought maybe it was like some people, but like just how loud it was and just how far I could hear it, like it just didn't seem like it could be anything else that I've really heard before, and it was really, really strange. And I think it went on for a good 10 or 15 minutes before it stopped.
Well, somebody made a comment that they can hear a dog howling or barking. Could that have been what you heard?
There was a dog barking in the background, but it was separate from that. I think it was
It seemed like it was
because
responding.
there were a couple dogs in the neighborhood that were actually barking because of it. Like I could tell, like after that was done, like you could hear the dogs in the background because they were obviously hearing the same thing. But it really couldn't have been a dog or anything else, because it was like this like scream, almost like this howl scream that I've never really heard.
Interesting.
I'd love for somebody to like pick that video apart for us, just to, let us know like whether that is in the right, I don't know, the hertz of, human, dog, what that would be. Because, we also know that there's a lot of cougar up there, but that didn't sound like any
No, it
cougar.
didn't.
I mean, we have cougar right behind our house down here.
Yeah.
And that just didn't sound like cougar, but cougar they can sound really strange. They can.
Yeah, they sound often like, when I've heard them, it sounds like a young woman screaming. It's really eerie.
Yes. Yes. Yep. Yep. It's really crazy. We've had several incidents. Like it seems like whenever we go up, I try to go up there when it's like berry season, because I can pick 10 gallons of blackberries like pretty quickly up there, and I like to make pies and things like that. But that was one of the years that we were up there. Like we tend to go up like towards the end, late August. We haven't been up there that late recently, but there's been several times where just strange things have happened. And so when I go berry picking, I will wander off into the woods by myself, but we happen to be on the road that goes between Port Angeles and where we were staying. And we, on one particular incident, like trying to think, like just providing a little bit of context here, but it's not too far from where we were staying, but we were headed out of town. But we found out while we were heading out that the ferries to get back across to Seattle were completely booked up until midnight. And so, kind of took the steam out of us, and we were like, well, we got to head home another way. So we can't go back across the Olympic Peninsula. We're going to have to turn around, go down. And I was like, well, while we're deciding, I'm going to get out and pick some more berries. And so we did. And then Chris said, well, if you're going to pick more berries, I'm going to go back and see if that shop is open, because I'm just going to hang here and eat some smoked salmon. And I was like, all right. So I get into the berry, there, and actually what grows up there, it's the Himalayan blackberry. So it's quite invasive. They're trying to eradicate it because it's taken over everything. And so in a lot of the places that they're setting aside for like public areas, they're trying to get rid of that Himalayan blackberry, but it's just all over the place and it's thick. So when you walk in even a foot, you start getting entangled in those bushes in a hurry, and you can't get out without tearing your clothes. I mean, you just can't. They just surround you. And so but right before we left, Chris was like, well, I'm going to head back. And he goes, I can come back and pick you up. And I said, well, it'll only take me a few more minutes. And so I was pretty entangled in the bushes, and one of the areas that went from private land to, I'm not sure if it was state or if the county took it over. The county wanted it for open space for the public. But boy, oh boy, did I smell like the worst smell ever. And I've never been able to explain it. I've never been able to describe what it was that I smelled. But the weird part is like, I grabbed my stuff because we knew it was going to take us longer now to get down around the peninsula. So we had to get going. I jumped in the car and at that moment it registered. But in the moment that I was in the bushes and entangled and trying to get back myself out, knowing what that smell was, I didn't think about it. I knew that it was just foul. And I remember looking, going, God, somebody must have dumped like an elk, whatever, dumped it in here. Because sometimes that'll happen. They'll dump something on the side of the road. But it wasn't until I got back in the truck and we started to head home. And I was like, wait a minute, something wasn't quite right about that. But, that's always hindsight. Something just wasn't quite right about it, but you don't think about it at the time.
Yeah. Which is not unusual when it comes to Sasquatch, that people don't think about things that are obvious. When later you think, God, why wasn't I even thinking that? But it's just, I don't know if it's them or what it is, but it's so many times I've had a camera, I've had a recorder, and something will happen and I never thought to turn it on. And I'm thinking later, why was it that I never thought of that? But this question here about berry picking, that's risky where you have bears, because that's what they're after. And so is Sasquatch. And so there's been lots of people have seen them around berries.
The other thing, the other thing is that video of the noises was within that same week that I had that experience when I was picking berries that year. So it was later in the season, towards the end of August, closer to Labor Day. It was at that time that we got I smelled that smell, and we also got that video.
Well, there's another video here, and I'm not sure when this was taken. Let's just show the one that says strides, and then we can pull up the pictures of that.
So take a stride. Those are huge strides.
So tell us about this.
So that was very near where Chris encountered that hunter. And then we were going up to do some pine marten surveys. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I was doing a science fair project on, I think it was pine martens at the time. And as we were driving back down the pass, we just got done cross country skiing, and we were coming down the pass, and we saw these footprints, and we got out, right, and we walked down and we looked at them, and we thought, wow, these are like really, really far apart. So we decided to go see, like, we wanted to see like how far apart they were. So like, that's why I went next to them, because I could barely like jump and reach the next footprint in front of it. It was really, the strides were huge.
And we did see them on the way up. So we went up to do the pine marten research on the way up. And it wasn't until we returned on the way back, because we glanced at them on the way up, but didn't necessarily think anything of it until we were out. I don't know if we were cross-country skiing or snowshoeing that day, but it was like on the way back. So it was, it was probably, I don't know, 3, 4 o'clock, something like that, before sundown. But incidentally, that area, I found out later, some runners were running up that that pass, and they encountered something that they can't understand, and it was on a I wish I could remember, it was on a podcast. I just can't remember whose it was, but they specifically mentioned from Elk Creek to the top of the pass right there, and Elk Creek's right at the base of it, and then if you go up a little farther, that's where Chris ran into the hunter. So it's all within a, how many, what do you think, like 10-mile radius or 5-mile radius?
3-mile radius. Also, I encountered up there on top of what's called Spruce Hole, which is just above that same area. I was doing just a patrol in an area after hunting season was over, and I heard this honking sounds coming from the woods, like somebody hitting that log against another log. So I started walking into the area to see if it was illegal activity, like by hunter or by woodcutters or loggers or something. And when I got in the area, I walked in. Probably it was right at dusk, very getting very dark, and I walked in about probably half a mile to 3/4 of a mile. And as soon as I got in the area, it stopped, and I couldn't find any tracks, motorized vehicle tracks, or anything of the sort. I just heard this honking sound, and I didn't know Bigfoot encounters were like that, where people were reporting there was honking sounds. So it was, I was unaware of it, and so all of a sudden I encountered it. That's why I thought it was just probably somebody out there back, trying to do something illegal because of the time of day, one thing, and then also, the noise was just so loud, and it was in a flat meadow, and then there was aspen stand behind it, and so the 3/4 of miles I walked in was almost on a meadow, and once I got into the trees, it stopped, and that's all I heard.
Interesting. Throw up those pictures, the still ones.
The weird part is we. Okay.
Go ahead, Kelly.
When I was going to say, like we hiked back in there because Chris had told me about it, because there's been plenty of times where Chris has come home and he's just like, I don't really know what I heard, but it was something weird. And then he would describe it to me, and I was like, let's go back up there. Let's kind of check that out. And so, I always laugh because Chris likes to take the shortcut, but it ends up being the long cut. But he knows the woods by the back of his hand. He knows where he's going all over the place. So he dragged us all over that area, and we found nothing. And, I was just hoping to see something or get something, some indication. And of course, he was looking because he thought, it's illegal firewood cutters.
Sure.
It's, somebody doing something illegal. And of course, that's not how I approached it, but that's how he kind of approaches everything. It's got to be somebody in there doing something illegal because that's his job,
Sure. Well, when you look at these, so these are some close-ups, which they're interesting. It's all I can say. They've melted. Keep going down a little bit, Steph. But they're big. That's the main thing. They're huge. So I'm guessing these had been there for days at least, if not maybe a bit longer. Depends on how long it had snowed, how long before it had snowed.
Yeah.
Right.
And
so
let's go back.
Usually when you do
Go back
Pine
to the
Marten
first one, Steph.
studies, it's better. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Kelly, and I'll talk about this.
Well, when you do Pine Marten studies, what you want to do is wait for it to snow and then wait for it to settle a little bit. Then you can get the tracks of the Pine Marten and whatever prey that it might be after. And so, but it appeared that whatever this was, we even called the other law enforcement, who happens to be a good friend of ours, whose kids also grew up with Joshua, and we've said, what do you think? Could an elk just bury itself, hop from one location to the next and bury itself. And he, all he could say was, it's interesting, but I don't have a clue what that would be. The thing that got me was that they're in a straight line, and I don't know, that just seemed a little odd to me, but maybe not. Maybe, I mean, I've seen all sorts of stuff in the woods and I know what I'm looking at, but it just didn't, I don't know, something seemed off about it, and that's why we took the pictures and the videos.
Sure. Well, Michael's right. Very often Sasquatch will walk in a straight line. So they swing one foot in front of the other, and there's not offset. It's just in a straight line. I've seen it multiple times now, and I don't know why they do that, but that's kind of a unique thing about them. But typically if we're going to measure a stride, we would measure heel to heel or toe to toe. And somebody asked how tall you were at that point, Josh. Any idea how tall you were for reference?
I was probably like, no, I was probably like 5'5", 5'7", maybe.
Okay.
He's 6 foot now, so
yeah.
Okay.
I probably wasn't.
Did you happen to measure them at all?
we did not. No, we did not. And that's why I tried to get the video of Joshua trying to jump. But if you notice, if you look straight ahead, they head up the hill, but then we lost them because the snow got sparse. And so we lost the tracks. They just disappeared. And I was like, well, maybe it was mud, but there was no impression in the mud. There was nothing on that hillside. They just were gone. And I would think that they'd continue, because I was determined to follow them. We could have just parked on the side of the road and just followed them straight up. But yeah, I don't know. It just, yeah.
Well, when Josh jumps,
I wished I'd done a little bit more now in hindsight.
Yeah, sure. Well, hindsight is always 20/20, but when Josh jumps, it looks like, I mean, you're not even matching the stride, but your jump is probably 4 foot, maybe.
No.
And these are obviously further apart than that.
Right.
Yeah.
But they can be, I've seen tracks.
Especially in that deep snow.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen Sasquatch tracks 6 to 7 feet apart, stride to stride, and even up to 10 and 12 feet apart when they're running. So it's huge strides. I mean, unbelievable. Somebody made a comment.
Knowing how big those were, like,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You finish your thought.
I was wondering if something might have jumped in, like into, I don't know. I was trying to explain it again, right? Just like in the beginning of the show when I said everything that you see, you try to explain what you're seeing, and it's hard to explain it. There was no other tracks around it. Because typically if you see elk or deer, usually there's many that are, behind it or around it. I don't know. I wish I could, I don't know. I guess I would have done a little bit more in terms of measuring had I thought that it was something, but at the time we were like, yeah, this is interesting, right?
Yeah. Well, there was some conversation earlier about the Patterson-Gimlin footage from Bluff Creek, and I think this is a good case in point. Her tracks were in a straight line, just like we're talking about. They were not offset, but they were in a straight line. So the best known video we have of Sasquatch, in her case, on that sandbar, she was walking 1 foot directly in front of the other. So I think that's, from from the best video footage we have, she walked in a straight line. So that's pretty good evidence that that's what they do. But, frankly, yeah, that's the best footage we've ever gotten. But there is so much footage out there now online that I believe is real. I mean, there's probably hundreds of videos, honestly, that are real. They're just at a distance, or they're just a brief glimpse of them. But there's way more than people imagine there is that's out there currently.
Yeah. Incidentally, that same area, so if you go up to the top of that pass, I want to say 3 years ago now, maybe not quite that long. It had to have been about 3 years now. But we went up there with same friends, incidentally, the same law enforcement officer that just came back from Bluff Creek that was that I had sent you some information about. I think it was like Onion Lake or something like that, Jim. We were up there with ATVs, and Chris and I actually hiked it. The boys and him took the ATVs in, and they got way back into an area that was probably, I'm guessing, what do you think, 10, 15 miles in where they were?
About 7.
Yeah, he thinks it's closer to 10, but so in there, that friend of ours sent back pictures of the boys, and this is the photo I couldn't come up with. I don't know what I did with it, but they're standing next to some very large tree breaks, and they can't log that area. I know that for a fact because they were sued. Forest Service was sued, and they had to cease and desist logging activities because of mass movements, soil mass movement potential. Yeah. So that area is only accessible by ATVs, horseback, or hiking, and it's way back in. And incidentally, it's very near where the last grizzly bear was killed. I don't know if anybody knows the story about the grizzly bear that was killed down here, but it's in that same area. But those tree breaks were quite large too. And the only caption I got on the text that I had gotten was interesting. And Joshua was the one that was there in front of those tree breaks. And how high up do you think they were?
Yeah, so like standing next to him, I think I was like maybe 5'7", 5'8". Again, like we had to stand on top of the ATV to actually reach where we think it would have been snapped. So it was high up. I would say at least 7 or 8 feet up.
Well,
I'll still see if I can find those photos. I'm still digging for them.
Yeah, do. Because I'd like to see those. But we've seen tree breaks. I've seen them 10 feet up. I mean, easily 10 feet up. And broken exactly the way a sapling that's 3 feet, 4 feet tall is broken. Broken the same way, but this is a tree, this big around, snapped. And so it's bizarre.
Yeah.
And there was in the picture, all there was those 2 trees. That's it.
Yeah, interesting. If you can find it, I'd like to see it.
Did you see it?
Hey, Chris, when you were out in the woods, did you see? I should have preloaded some of these photos, but how many times did you see strange breaks or trees? And I've seen hundreds of these trees that are bent over and then stuck into the ground to keep an arch shape. It's not just that they're bending, but they're actually jammed in the ground, or TPs or stuff like that.
I've seen several TPs, but I wasn't sure who made them. I didn't know if it was hunters or other people that, just was out there, hiking for the day and just got bored and just decided to do something different. But, I can't really recall anybody or tell me anybody to say anything that was bent over like that.
Huh.
That I can recall anyway.
Well, that's interesting because here, and I've only really done extensive research in Colorado, I see them everywhere, everywhere. And so I've got, I mean, literally hundreds, if not thousands of photos of all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, they're very common, very common. So as Forest Service employees, when would you say that you guys, when and how did you come to the conviction that Sasquatch was a real being?
Well, honestly, like it's for me, it's the same thought as, are we the only ones in the universe? I think that's pretty damn self-centered to think that we are the only ones that exist. So to me, I'm more open to that because I find it hard to believe that we are the only ones who exist in the entire universe. That's just too far-fetched for me. And statistically, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I think, when you're open to things like that, you tend to, in my career, there's just too many things that I can't explain. And so I couldn't tell you definitively what's going on out there, but there's just too many things that I can't explain. And I don't know how to answer them. I don't even know how to answer that question really, because, I know people who have had experiences, who have come face to face, and not in my wildest dreams would I ever call that person a liar. Because I know their character. And I don't know, and most people who have those experiences have nothing to gain by it. In fact, mostly they have things to lose by it because of the ridicule. And so, I don't know that if I had run into anything while I was working in the woods, which, I spent a lot of time backpacking myself, a lot of times hiking by myself, and so did Chris. And in a lot of cases in different directions. Had I run into it, I don't know exactly what my reaction would have been. I don't know if I would have shared it, especially if it was on the job. But now I'm older in my age and I don't really care. If I saw something, I probably would share it because I would know what I'd seen, But and I don't want to take away, because the people that typically have those experiences, it's very traumatic for them. And knowing people that have had those experiences and how traumatic it is, I don't think that I would ever discount that, because I think that's highly unfair to somebody's psyche who's been through it.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting.
It's interesting because, you look back over like 30 years and you think to yourself, all the times that you've been in the woods. I mean, we must have crossed teepee structures 1,000 times when we were hiking, or, I don't know, maybe 100 times, but, never really gave it a thought until something more like seeing the footprints happen. And then you start investigating, and then you start putting the pieces together and you're like, maybe what I saw was not what I saw.
Right.
And so there's just so much that I can't explain. I wish I could. And so, I'll share this other story. This just happened this summer when we were up in the Squamish Valley. I think I shared this with you just before we did the podcast. But we went after we left the Pacific Northwest. So we stay out on the coast quite often. And in fact, I don't think we really missed a year. And since Joshua's been little out there, and we do quite a bit of hiking and biking and you name it, all over that. I mean, we have combed the Olympic Peninsula, and we haven't really, we're in the woods more than most people. And what we have are only those few incidences that we've sent to you. But when we left this year and then traveled up through Vancouver, we didn't go through Vancouver Island. We actually went through the city of Vancouver, and then we went north to Squamish Valley. and we were up there because we were mountain biking Whistler Blackcomb. And so we decided to stay there for, I think we were there, 3 days or 3 days. And the morning that we were scheduled to leave, it was about 5 o'clock in the morning. And of course, the other family that's also in law enforcement went with us, because, you know, all of us were mountain biking up there. And I woke up to the sound of a train whistle, which would not be unheard of because there were train tracks behind where we were camping in our tents. And it was Squamish Valley. So you go past the town of Squamish, and then you hang a left and you actually go in between sort of a mountain range, and you're heading up through a pretty thick, dense forest along. And I can't remember the name of the river, but we were camped right in there. And I kept hearing like it sounded like a whistle, and it just kept going off. And it was about 5 a.m. and I was just waking up, and we were in our sleeping bags. And I was like that. And then all the dogs would go off, that anybody that was camping around us, the dogs just went berserk, and then it stopped. And then it happened again, and the dogs would go berserk. And I finally started, at 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm not necessarily that with it, but it started to register.
I get it.
I don't know what that is. And so I kind of, so Chris heard it too. It was very faint. But by the time it registered, I quickly threw my clothes on, pulled the mountain bike off the back of the truck, and headed down the road, not really thinking about that too. I didn't think it through, apparently. We have bear spray. I didn't take the bear spray. I could have run into anything. I didn't. And of course, as soon as I hit the road and started heading up and realized it was coming from behind me, I turned around and went probably 4 or 5 miles the other direction.
Wow.
And by then it stopped. But I had asked the person who was walking into the campground, she ran the shop or something, I don't know, but it was very early and she was kind of blurry-eyed. And I said, "Did you hear that? Are you hearing what I'm hearing?" And she said, "Well, the train comes through on Thursday and Saturday." And it must have been a Friday, because we headed home that Friday. And I said, "Is there any chance that train would have come up at least as far as Squamish?" And she said, "No, it just runs those 2 days a week, and it's more of a tourist train." And I said, so then I started thinking, well, is it logging operations? Because having worked in Alaska and being out with those logging operations, sometimes there's whistles, especially when you're doing helicopter logging, you're doing cable logging, because those slopes are very steep. And so a lot of times there's a lot of noise around that just to warn people to get out of the way. And so they'll send off horns. But that wasn't quite the sound either. It was more of a scream, howl, train whistle type noise. And then right about 6:15, it all stopped. It just went completely dead. It happened from about 5 to 6:15, and it was gone just like that. And I still can't explain it. I don't know what happened, but Chris was witness to that, because I don't know that I could have gotten it on video, because it was it had to have been the mountain range on either side of us. I don't know, or north or south of us. But he did hear it. But I don't know. What do you think it might have been?
That's the problem, is I'm not aware of all the different noises that are out there. So it's something new to me.
Yeah.
That's my problem with that, with Bigfoot sightings. That a lot of things,
Yeah.
I'm becoming more and more aware of it as I get more educated about it.
Well, I think last week on the podcast, I told the story, or maybe the week before, that people were talking about weird noises in the woods. And I was in an area outside of Bailey where there were no roads anywhere close. And we're out there about 10 o'clock at night, and I hear somebody beep to lock their car. Beep, just like that. And I'm like, there's no way a car can get out here. No way. And this is late at night, and you hear somebody locked their car. And I'm like, okay, can't explain that. Bizarre. You just kind of chalk it up and say, okay, that's another weird thing. So yeah, just somebody wrote high strangeness. That's
somebody had asked earlier. Yeah, for sure. Somebody had asked earlier about the footprints that Joshua was jumping in between. They started in a deeper part. So
They actually started from the road.
right. So they crossed the highway. Maybe they didn't. They just showed up as you cross the highway. And then there's a very deep ditch that went down. So it was like, I don't know, I want to say at least 10 to 15 foot slope off the crown of that road down into sort of a catch basin. And I'm not so sure that catch basin isn't wet in the summertime. We've driven past there and it looks rather swampy in there when you're driving up the pass. And it started there. So we're assuming it came from across the road, but we went to the other side to look down and there was nothing. So there was nothing on the other side of the road. And the road was clear, fairly clear. But then once you got off the crest of that road and down into where you crossed, that's where the prints were and no place else.
Interesting.
So
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, it just, again, strange. Maybe it came down the road. Maybe I don't know. I could not tell you, but my first instinct was to look straight across the road because if it's a large animal like elk, moose, like typically they're crossing the road. And
yeah.
But there was nothing down. There was nothing down below the road as you're heading down towards Elk Creek. There was nothing.
Interesting. Yeah, another one of those weird things that you just can't explain, and you're there and you're looking, and so many people talk about them. It's in the snow, particularly. They just start in the middle of a area, and then, or else they just stop in the middle of an area and they don't continue. And it's like, where did this go? Whatever this was, where did it go? Because it just kind of disappeared at that point. So, yeah, just too many weird things with Sasquatch.
I think for sure. And I think now that I'm not working for the Forest Service and I'm, and I actually have some more time to look around while I'm out in the woods. Typically when you're doing your job, you're focused on what you're doing, whether that be, I don't know, whatever that happens to be on the day. But now that we're out hiking, I tend to pay a little bit more attention to what is around us now. And that could be because I've had to do a little bit of research to figure out what those prints were, what we might have heard. And so I'm learning from other people, but I'm definitely more aware of my surroundings than I would have been had I been just working. And just to give some perspective to that, like when I say that, like I'm aware of my surroundings, but I'm usually pretty focused on a job. And I know Chris was too, because he was looking for people who were, maybe doing illegal things. It was a little different when I lived in Alaska because I had to be aware of my surroundings because of grizzlies. And so there was a lot of, I had a lot of run-ins with grizzlies when I should have been paying more attention. But I think you get more complacent when you're down here because you don't plan on running into a grizzly. So you can just focus on what you're doing. You don't necessarily have to worry about a predator sneaking up behind you or watching you, I don't know. I mean, I just think I'm more complacent down here than I was when I worked up in Alaska for sure. But I think I'm also now more taking the time to sort of look around more.
Yeah. Well, that's what it takes, is being aware and knowing what to look for. That's one of the reasons why we built our museum, is to help people see what they can look for. This comment here about the BFRO, 3,500 public reports and 74,000 that are not public. Well, a couple of comments on that before we end, because I'm looking at time. But this is one organization, all right? One organization. Yeah. and they have more than probably most organizations, but I would say that all the organizations together that are like this, like mine, others, there's probably combined, we probably have 200,000 reports, and I'm not even exaggerating on that. So
Wow.
there's so many reports that to discount them, you have to have decided you're not going to believe that Sasquatch can be real, because there's no way that many people
Right.
can be mistaken. Even if you take half of them, you still have 100,000 that you have to deal with. So, it's just, but the
Right.
BFRO, one of the unique things about them is any report, and I don't know why they made this decision, but any report that had anything paranormal in the report, they put it in another folder and they never make those public. So it's just a decision that Matt Moneymaker made back at some point. But if they were to put up on their site all the reports, especially the ones that had something paranormal, it's way more than 3,500. I can tell you that. So just again, decisions we make in our research that don't make sense sometimes. So, well,
Right. And just in listening to people in Alaska when I worked up there, this is the one thing that I guess it started making me really think about this a little harder and a little more serious. But especially in Southeast Alaska, when I worked out on those islands, I flew out to some places where a lot of people hadn't been, and there was also a lot of research that was going on out there. And when somebody from the Forest Service comes back and says that they saw a footprint, but the only access to that area is by float plane, helicopter, it's just, to me, that seems more unbelievable than believable. When who would know where a biologist is going to be in the field at the time, or a soil scientist? Who would know that before that would happen in order to hook something like that? Like, that was the first thing that really made me sort of question what I believed about it, because I guess I never really thought much about it until I spent some time talking to the people that were out there, in those remote areas, and when you're out in a remote area like that, it's raining a lot in Southeast Alaska. You got lots of time to talk and hang out, because there can be days where it's just horizontal raining, and so sometimes you get stuck, and the float plane doesn't come back and get you for a while. So you have a lot of those conversations, and you can't explain it. You can't explain some of that stuff.
No. And it's just with Bigfoot research, there's so many things you just have to say, that's weird, can't explain it, don't know what it is or how they do it. But that's why I say my research has led me to the convictions I have, and I'm trying to be as scientific as I can be in my research, and I just cannot explain. So it's just bizarre. Well, listen, you guys, it's been a pleasure having you. I really appreciate all three of you giving up some time this evening to be on the show. It means a lot to me. And I'm hoping I can get down there and do some research with you guys in your neck of the woods.
For sure. You're welcome anytime.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
We'll get those horses out and get them doing their job.
You bet. You bet. We'll go for a long ride and see what we find. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. For those who are going to be tuning in next week, I've got the director of Small Town Monsters, the one that Alex Pitakov does research for. I'll be talking with Seth Breedlove, who's the main man with Small Town Monsters, and hear what stories he's got to tell us. Appreciate you guys all being on tonight and tuning in. And I wish you all a wonderful, happy, family-filled Thanksgiving this year, and look forward to being with you next week after we've all stuffed our bellies with turkey and ham. Thank you, guys. Love you. Keep on squatching.